But on that particular mission, I was flying a squadron lead of the low squadron of the high group, and there was one airplane they picked out to shoot down, and they did a good job, and they shot me full of holes. I had number 1 engine was feathered, number 2 engine was on fire, number 3 engine was running away, had the hydraulics shot out, had the communications shot out, had a fire in the tail, and had a fire in the radio room. We pretty well realized that we weren't going to make it. Only about 1 out of 4 ever made it. And if you got over 10 missions, you were living on borrowed time. And everybody realized that. So you went out and you did the best job you could. Every day you tried to perform and get the mission accomplished with accuracy on the target, because targets were selected because of priority, and if you didn't get it that day, that means you have to go back the next day. I saw my first airplane. It was a Pitcairn autogyro in Carrollton, Ohio, and I realized then that that was someplace for me to have a goal to attain, to get into the air. And then at that time, which was all part of the now Experimental Aircraft Association, it was then they had the home builders, and they were building their airplanes in the garages, and no kits then. They were doing it all by hand. I used to watch them make a wing and watch them make some fuselage, and there'd be a few of them around town that did that, and I sit there and watch them do it every time. Oh, I was 9 and 10 years old then, and enjoying every bit of it. I think it was beautiful. When I was there, I thought this was the most wonderful town in the world, and it's still a great town. It's like so many nice towns, it's too far north for an old man, so I had to stay down south. But when I was a little child, I thought, well, when I grow up and I can, live where I want to live right here. It's that kind of a town. Well, it's a long story. I sold newspapers on the corner in Steubenville, Ohio. I purchased newspapers for 2 cents, sold them for 3 cents, made a penny a piece, and if I sold 30 a day and did it 5 days a week, had $1.50, I could walk 4 miles to a little airport called Half Moon Airport in the Panhandle of West Virginia. I could get 15 minutes of dual time in an Aeronica C3, 38 horsepower, 2-cylinder. Take off, make a couple turns, go back and land. It was $6 an hour dual, so that was my 15 minutes. I'd walk 4 miles back home, and next week I start all over again. I was probably a junior in high school, so that put me in the 16, 17-year age category.
Is there anybody else in your crowd, in your class, that was that crazy about airplanes, that was doing what you were doing?
Nobody I was associated with, nobody I knew had anything to do with airplanes. It was just my original and fondest desire. I guess it's probably my feeling for adventure, feeling for something that was different, and it was all I was ever interested in. Well, the war started, when it started in Europe, that would have made me in the category 17 years of age. Well, the feeling in our hometown was much like it was every place else. They were isolationists. We have an ocean on each side of us, and we're protected by the ocean, and most people thought it would never come to pass. And of course, the politicians, including President Roosevelt, said that he would keep us out of the war, but that didn't work out, so as we all know. Well, it was on a Sunday, as everyone knows, and I was working in a service station with another young fellow, and I said, I don't know where Pearl Harbor is, but if the Japanese are jumping on us, they're making a big mistake. Which it took a little while for that to come to pass, but it ended up exactly that way. Well, the first thing I did, I went to Patterson Field at that time. They had a Fairfield Air Depot was there, and that's where they took care of all the damaged aircraft. And I worked on a P-39 that had bellied in on the grass field at Patterson Field, which of course now became part of the Wright-Patterson complex. And I worked there and took my cadet exams there, passed the cadet exams, and they told me to take my letter back to my draft board and let them know that I should be held in waiting till my cadet exam went through and I was assigned a class. So I went back and they turned that in to them, and they promptly drafted me. And they didn't pay attention to the letter I had. They drafted me. I ended up in the 305th Combat Engineers in the 80th Division in Camp Forest, Tullahoma, Tennessee. And I was there for some time until the orders came through transferring me to the Aviation Cadet Corps. And at that time, I was transferred to Nashville, Tennessee, where they had classification and made a determination if you were going to be a pilot, navigator, or bombardier. Well, the cadet program was a training for discipline. It was a training to be an officer. It gave some ground training, ground school in aeronautics and in engines and in weather and in radio communications. We all had to learn the Morse code until we could pass a certain amount of words per minute in Morse code. And mainly it was learning to be an officer. And after the completion of that, which was at Maxwell Field in Montgomery, Alabama, completion of that, went to primary flight school, Decatur, Alabama, flying a Stearman PT-17. Well, I went into the Air Forces with the intent of trying to be a fighter pilot. I wanted to fly P-38s. I thought it was the most beautiful airplane in the world and very effective. However, I tried my very best and ended up in the top 10 of the class, and the top 10 went to B-17s. So that's what happened there. I graduated from flight school on July the 28th of 1943, and that was exactly 62 years ago yesterday. And I was given my orders to report to Sebring, Florida. I reported there on August the 4th of 1943. Married my high school sweetheart the same day, and started transition training in the B-17. In the left seat of a B-17, I had approximately 173 hours. I had a total of 520 hours of aircraft flight time when I went to combat. We really realized immediately that this is a war that had to be won. It had to be won as quickly as possible, and everyone wanted to get involved as quickly as we could. As a matter of fact, I wanted to fly a bomber to England. I didn't get a chance to. I went over to England on a boat, and then I flew back. But everyone was anxious to get the job done. Well, it really did. I had a more of a profound effect prior to that. When we went to Kearney, Nebraska, my wife Billy was with me, and I had to send her home. And when I looked over my shoulder and saw her for the last time, I knew that it could very well be for the last time. And that was very, very trying for me. Leaving Boston on the ship, the SS Brazil, was trying, but not as bad as it was when I left Billy. It took us 13 days. We were on the SS Brazil. It took us 13 days to get there because we were in a convoy. Got there got to England and assigned to my bomb group on June the 12th of 1944. The first mission was very educational, very informing, and very stressful. Our first mission was on June the 21st, and it was to Berlin. And this was shortly after they'd had a buzz bomb or V1 attack on London the night before. And we had about a 1,200 bomber stream going to Berlin. And it was my first encounter with a German fighter aircraft. We were flying behind the 91st bomb group, and a bunch of fighters came through the 91st. I think there were 6 bombers went down on that particular pass, and they came right back and came through our bomb group, the 398th bomb group. We didn't lose any people on that particular pass, but we lost several a little bit later when we got into the flak area. Matter of fact, our group commander, Major Killen, West Point officer, he was shot down that day and almost took me with him when he went down. We almost had a mid-air collision, and my co-pilot noticed him because I was flying formation. Noticed him, brought him to my attention, and I deviated from my normal course and averted a mid-air collision. Well, I had several missions. We took flak damage and aircraft damage. On July the 6th, which of course was Billy's birthday, my radio operator got hit fairly badly, and he had to be replaced. On August the 6th, which was 1 month later, of course, my tail gunner, he had his left knee shot off by friendly fire, and that was a very memorable occasion, one in which I refused to continue the mission and returned him to home base because as badly as he was injured, he would have died from loss of blood. And I refused to do that. And I reported that to the commander. He approved my decision, and I returned back to Nut Hempstead, which was the home base of the 398th Bomb Group. On several occasions we'd lost an engine, but were able to maintain formation and had flak damage, considerable flak damage, because this airplane is a wonderful airplane as far as its capability of remaining airborne with a tremendous amount of damage. So we were very, very fortunate in that respect. But we had numerous damages, numerous problems, but we survived. during that particular period, everyone, well, we pretty well realized that we weren't going to make it. Only about 1 out of 4 ever made it. And if you got over 10 missions, you were living on borrowed time. And everybody realized that. So you went out and you did the best job you could. Every day you tried to perform and get the mission accomplished with accuracy on the target, because targets were selected because of priority, and if you didn't get it that day, that means you have to go back the next day and get it. So we did our very best. It was difficult. We get up in the morning sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 o'clock, depending on the duration of the mission. You get up in the morning and you went and showered and shaved in cold water and went down and had breakfast, and normally it was powdered eggs, and then you go out and get your briefing from the commander and go out and pick up all your survival gear, go to your airplane and talk to your crew chief, your ground crew chief, and know the condition of the aircraft, and load up and you can get into crank engines on time and get in position and take off. And we'd take off about every 15 seconds. We'd be a takeoff. And I was there in June, July, and August of 1944, which would be the best time of the year for any flying. And we had an awful lot of haze and fog early in the morning because we had to go long distances. And I've sat in the seat for several times for 11 hours and never moved out of the seat. And that gets to be a bit trying. And now you do that 3 days in a row, and you just about get used up, even for a young fella. And we had, the bad thing about it was we had 3 crews that lived in a Quonset hut, and that would give you a total of 12 officers. And you didn't make a lot of friends because, you'd be flying on a mission and you'd look out in the formation, and then the airplane would disappear. You got a direct hit into Bombay, the airplane would disappear, and some fellow that night that you were going to meet at the bar to have a drink in the officers club or go to town for a bite of dinner, he's not there anymore. And so you didn't make a lot of friends. You couldn't. It was a real drag, and you got to be a physical with the three days in a row, and it was an emotional as well. But I was never aware of anybody that did not go when they were asked to go or ordered to go. So we knew it had to be done, and we did the best job we could, and thankfully some of us survived. August 13th, 1944 was a Sunday, and we thought we were quite fortunate. It was a short mission, only 7 hours instead of 9, 10, or 11, and the weather was halfway decent, and everything was going well, and it should have been a fairly easy mission, and in most cases it was. We had 36 airplanes, and we were bombing a bridge at a place called La Manoir, which is about halfway between Le Havre, which is on the coast, and Paris on the Seine River. And we were doing that because we're trying to prevent the Germans from taking all their heavy equipment back into Germany and fortifying a stronghold. And we were very fortunate. The bridge was destroyed, and it was not repaired for several years. But on that particular mission, I was flying a squadron lead of the low squadron of the high group, and there was one airplane they picked out to shoot down, and they did a good job, and they shot me full of holes. I had number 1 engine was feathered, number 2 engine was on fire, number 3 engine was running away, had the hydraulics shot out, had the communications shot out, had a fire in the tail, had a fire in the radio room. And I've said several times that at being at 22 years of age, I was foolish enough to think I could still fly it. I only had about 45 miles to go to the English Channel, hoping to make the channel and being picked up by the British, which had an outstanding air-sea rescue program. However, later I was informed that the left wing was on fire. And I had briefed my people from the very beginning that we can do a lot, but nothing we can do about a wing fire because there's fuel there and it's going to blow. So I gave the word to evacuate, hand signals because we had no radios. And everybody got out of the airplane. We had 9 people on board. 7 of the 9 received Purple Hearts that day. And everybody was fortunate enough to get out. I had put the airplane on autopilot. It was in a gentle left-hand turn. Now my co-pilot, Ben Clark, and I went out through the nose hatch.
Yeah.
He went out first, and his parachute opened immediately. He told me later that he did not open it, but even so it opened. Now I went out, and knowing that they were machine gunning us from the ground, and also rifle fire, I delayed my drop by 20,000 feet. So I dropped about 4 miles free fall till I opened my parachute, and that free fall takes 2 minutes of time. It's a long 2 minutes. I have awful lot to think about. In the 2 minutes I had to think, I was concerned about my people. And while we were a crew, they were still my responsibility. And we acted as a crew, and it was an outstanding crew. I was concerned about them. I knew some had already been injured by the anti-aircraft before we evacuated, and some of them were injured on the evacuation. But that was my primary concern, is my crew, make sure they get out, because I've seen so many airplanes blow up and the people never had a chance, and that was all I was after. And now the airplane, I put it on autopilot. It was in a left-hand turn, a gentle left-hand turn, made about 2 turns, and each turn it was getting closer to my co-pilot, and finally, about the time he was afraid it was going to run into him, then the airplane blew up and fell to the ground in various pieces. The number 3 engine that had been running away fell in a field some miles behind. It had already come apart. The rest of it was scattered over quite an area. Later, I was given pictures of the airplane after it hit the ground, which is very fortunate for me, because I'm sure there are very few people that have had an airplane shot out from under them, and then later in life, they had pictures given to them of what the airplane looked like on the ground. Now, I got those pictures 50 years after this happened, and think about the fact that there were very few cameras there. The Germans had taken almost all of the film, so I do not know where the pictures came from. They just came in the mail one day, which of course I've retained by all means. But I also had another thought. My mother had been worked in a PX in a field artillery base at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. My stepfather was a field artillery officer, and she worked there, and she used to send me large Hershey candy bars, and I put them in a little, what we call a musette bag, which is like a little knapsack or a backpack as they have today, and I hung it from a rafter to keep the rats from getting it. And then one of my first thoughts, well, those son of a guns back there are going to get my candy. But that came long after I was thinking about my crew. And they did, but that's another story. Well, I landed in a flax field outside on the outskirts of a little town called Bromptot, Bramtot, Bromptot, and I landed there at about 1:28 in the afternoon. Met by 2 young Frenchmen boys, about 13, 14 years of age, and they directed me in the direction away from the German personnel that was on the ground looking for me, and I ended up in a thicket by a V-1 launch site, bomb site, and stayed there the entire day, knowing I'd have to move at night. The young people had invited me to meet them at a church steeple that evening, which I tried to do, did not locate them. I did run across a man and his wife and a little girl. They knew who I was because they'd people in the area had been looking for me. And of course, I didn't know who they were. And at that time, you may be picked up by German sympathizers or Allied sympathizers. So you were taking a big chance on who you confronted. I was very fortunate. It happened to be that they were Allied sympathizers. And they took me to the mayor of Brompton, Monsieur Duboc, who was a fine gentleman, put me up in his attic, which was about 10 or 12 foot square. Everything's painted white. The entire room, all the furniture, everything was white. I spent 2 days there. I had given him my escape pictures, which were small pictures we had made in England that are about the size of a photograph on a driver's license. Gave him those, and the next day they made my identification papers, and my name was Ernest Borden, and I lived in a little town of Tricto, which was just south of there between Brompton and Rouen. Rouen being a big port on the Seine River and a large community there. So 2 days later, a gentleman from the neighborhood came up with 2 bicycles, and he and I started pedaling south, heading for the Allied lines.
Can I ask you this? Did you speak French, Hal? How did you communicate with these people?
Oh, it's all sign language. I spoke no French whatsoever. Very few of them spoke any English. A couple of them spoke broken English because they were actually very close to the English Channel and the North Sea, and it was about 40 miles away, really. So some of them had spoke some broken English because I didn't have a chance in the world speaking French. As a matter of fact, a little bit later, I was working on a farm outside of a town of Yvetot, Y-V-E-T-O-T, and the gentleman in the evening would take me out in the garden and try to teach me some French phrases, and finally he just gave up and said, just play deaf and dumb. And that was about the best I could do. I was pathetic. I tried real hard, had nothing close to the accent, and certainly had I been interrogated, I would have given myself away immediately. But they fronted for me. We encountered a lot of German soldiers on the road. Sometimes we'd stop in a little village and maybe have a cup of tea or something like that, and there'd be German soldiers sitting at the next table, and we just sat there, and I'm scared to death. But the Frenchman, he was calm and cool and collected, realizing, of course, that had I been identified as an American officer, that gentleman would have been shot. So he was taking a big chance. And we left there and went out to this little town of Yvetot, and I worked on a farm there, harvested hay and harvested wheat for several weeks. Moved out of there because the children were so proud that they had an American pilot there. They were telling everybody else in the neighborhood about me. And of course that's dangerous because now it gets back to the German sympathizers. So they moved me out of there into the town of Yvetot, and I spent a couple of weeks with a gentleman named Raoul, who was the district attorney for that particular area. And he later became, after the war was over, he became a judge in Paris, and he was a judge in the war criminals crimes. So he was very well thought of. He was an amateur radio operator, a ham radio operator, and he was granted a French license number 1. So apparently he had quite a priority. Spent time with him. As a matter of fact, he had a housekeeper, and she was there during the day, and I stayed in a room during the day. It was locked, and then when he came home, she left. Had dinner already on the stove. She left. He'd come up and open the door and get me out, and we'd sit down and chat over dinner, and he'd fix the soup, and then he'd fix the salad, and then he'd fix the entree. We sit there and talked about, because he had been a French fighter pilot in the first part of the war until they capitulated, and then he went back to his civilian business of being an attorney. But I stayed with him for a couple of weeks, and on one occasion we had a German officer come knocking on the door, which I hastened to my room, and he wanted a place to sleep that night. So my host put him up in a room right across from me. Spent the entire night there. The German officer got up the next morning, stole the host's camera, and departed and never said thank you. So that was some of my experiences with the German military. I spent 6 weeks in occupied France. I was rather in a hurry to get out of there because when I left my wife at Kearney, Nebraska, she was pregnant with our first child, and I wanted to get the message to her that I was safe, and I wanted to get out of occupied territory as quickly as possible. I got out in 6 weeks. I was the first officer or first airman of the 398th Bomb Group to escape the continent at that particular time. So I was very fortunate in that way. I ended up further down after I got across the lines, ended up with the British First Army, and then ended up with a ride on a C-47 that had come over to France carrying fighter drop tanks. And the guy said, if you help me unload these drop tanks, I'll take you back to England. And so several of us helped him unload these drop tanks, jumped on his airplane, and flew us back to London. Well, in London, they took us to an interrogation point, and Major White was in charge of it. We briefed him on everything that we had done, everything we had seen, and then they sent me back to my bomb group. I went back there and reported back, and it was quite unique because normally when a crew is shot down, the remaining crew members in the Quonset hut, they go ahead and take out what other clothing of the individuals were shot down that day. They pick out the clothing they want, and it's theirs. But when I went back, I went to Unit Supply and asked them if I had anything left. And they said, oh yeah, all your clothes are right here. And I said, well, how did that happen? And they said, well, we understood that you had been shot down, and your crew members and were such type individuals, and so the rest of the people in the Quonset hut said that if anybody's going to get back, Weekley's going to get back, and if I got back, they didn't want to be wearing my clothes. So all my clothes were there, and I spent one day there, and I was shipped back to the United States, to the Pentagon. I rode a train that night to Prestwick, Scotland. Went in a big barracks, double-deck bunks on both sides. I was laying on the bottom bunk about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and the sergeant quarters came through with a flashlight looking at the various names on the beds, and I said, who are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for Weekley. I said, you found him, what do you need? He said, there's a C-54 down in the ramp waiting to take you back to Washington, D.C. So I jumped on the airplane, and he flew me back. See, initially I said I wanted to fly a bomber to England and then come back on a boat. Here I just reversed. I took a boat to England and I flew back. I wanted that period to sort of spool down, to relax, so I wouldn't come home all uptight. But I didn't get that opportunity. And since I had been behind the German lines like about 2 days before that, I had some pretty decent information to give to the commanders in the Pentagon.
What was some of that type of information?
That type of, I generated information while I was in IFTO. I met some people that had lived in Le Havre, which was on the coast. Now, we needed coastal towns. We needed docks to bring our supplies and our personnel in. And we'd had a lot of trouble at Cherbourg, and it was pretty well destroyed. And then we had 2 big portable docks and one of those was destroyed in a bad storm. And in Le Havre, I had a good count of the number of military personnel. I even had to count down how many cows they had in town, so that what they could use as far as sustenance for the people. And I gave that information to the commanders, and we took over Le Havre rather quickly.
Was it part of your training to be that observant in that circumstance, or did you just say, if I get out of this, everybody's going to want to know this?
It wasn't part of the training, no. I just felt that the more information I could get, and the more I could help our cause, the better it would be all around. Because I knew that some of my people I'd been with in the combat engineers, they were over there on D-Day, and they were fighting their way through. And I just wanted, anything I could do, if I could make it one day shorter, I was more than happy to do it. I was looking forward to it. So I told them everything I knew. Any tanks that I saw, I told them where the location of the tanks, thinking they may not be there, but you never can tell. So I told them everything I knew, and I spent the time there with the officers in the Pentagon. I had an officer meet me, take me right there. I got there early in the morning, and I was there the whole day, and they pushed me onto a train that night. Well, I wanted to call my wife, but I couldn't call her and let her know that I was safe because of the extreme and heavy traffic they had at that time. And of course, the telephone systems were nothing like we have now. And I tried 2 or 3 times to get a connection, but it was impossible. So they, like I said, they pushed me onto a train because the train was full, and the conductor opened the door and pushed me onto the train and slammed the door shut. And that's the way we went on the Pennsylvania Railroad from Washington, D.C. up to Pittsburgh, and then from Pittsburgh across the Panhandle of West Virginia. When we crossed the Panhandle of West Virginia, there's a railroad bridge that crosses into Ohio. And when I crossed that bridge was my first real feeling that I'd made it home. Everything up to that was all on a graduated base, but when I crossed that bridge into Ohio, I knew I was home. I got in there about 4 o'clock in the morning. I got off the train, went to a payphone, and called my wife, and I said, "Open the door, I'm coming home." And I got a taxi cab and took me up on the hill where she lived with her mother during that particular time. And she had opened the door, and she was standing there, 7 months pregnant, still as beautiful as ever, and I was home. She was a very strong lady. Her reaction was she was so pleased she didn't know what to do. Woke her up wide awake, you know. But of course, in those days, a telephone call in the middle of the night was not always a good thing, and you received some bad information sometimes. But she was very strong, because when she was with her mother, the day she got the telegram from the War Department, normally if you have 4 stars, the person is killed in action. 3 stars, you're missing in action. She's looked at the telegram. She says, "Oh, Mom, he's okay. He's only missing in action. He'll be home fine." And so that's the kind of attitude she had. Of course, she really didn't understand the situation, but because I could have been a prisoner as well and been there a lot longer. Matter of fact, I could have been there almost another year. But that's the kind of a lady she was. And of course, it was a wonderful homecoming. And then, of course, after I did get home, then I called my mother, who was still working in the PX in Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
And what did your mom say?
Well, Mom was always worried. Mom was a worrier. My wife, Billy, was not a worrier. Mom was a worrier. She worried about everything that I did all my life, from the time I put on my first short pants till the time I walked across the street till the time I got my first motorcycle. And of course, when I started flying airplanes, she was scared to death. But she, like I say, she was a worrier from the very word. But of course, she was thrilled to death that I could make it. And in fact, shortly after that, I had the opportunity in my transfer from various bases, had the opportunity of stopping by and visiting with my mother and stepfather at Fort Sill. December the 7th, nobody knew anything. Everybody was sitting there with their mouth open. When I came back, everybody was hard at work. The men, the women, they had the ration stamps, they rationed sugar, they rationed meat, they rationed tires, they rationed gasoline. The people at home, they were collecting aluminum pots and pans and turning them in so that we could use them to make airplanes out of. And everybody was doing a fantastic job, and everybody was in favor of what we were doing. You go into a bar, you couldn't buy a drink. Everybody was so grateful for what you had contributed, and everybody was involved in it. We had 16 million Americans fighting in World War II, and of course now 12 million of those are going already, and we're losing about 14 to 1,500 a day right now. Oh, I felt that even before D-Day, because we could see it in the skies in Germany. We never did cut their production of aircraft down. They were producing aircraft in massive numbers, even at the end of the war. But the thing about it was, we had eliminated most of their experienced pilots. Now, they had been flying since the Civil War in Spain. They had a lot of on-the-job training. So when they fought in the Battle of Britain, so when our American pilots got there, they had never fired a shot in anger. And these German pilots have been killing people for several years. So it was a change, because now when our pilots started to get experience, then they started shooting down the experienced pilots that they had in Germany, and during the same time we were damaging their oil refineries, and the students that they were training got less and less flying time because they didn't have the oil and the gasoline to support them. So the whole thing changed, and now we had the superiority. And of course, when you take 2,000 bombers on a raid on any given day, and they're covered up with American fighters, people on the ground have got to realize that they can't last very long. We were all thrilled to death, everybody there, because we knew that we had reached a very important goal, but we were also concerned because we knew that we're losing some wonderful people. It had to be a disaster on that beach, and we were all concerned about that. I would have loved to have been able to have flown on that day, but I got there late, and I was not assigned to a group, and so we just enjoyed the thought that we had made one big important step. Now on VE Day, I was instructor in T6s at Gunner Field in Montgomery, Alabama, because they were instructing French students, and I felt that I was obligated. What the French had done for me had really saved my life. I was obligated to help as much as I could, so I volunteered. I had been a B-17 instructor at Lockburn Army Airfield near Columbus, Ohio, and when I knew that they needed help down there, I volunteered to go down and help train the French students. And I was there on VE Day. I remember especially because the commander restricted everybody from flying. There was no flying, and of course that was probably a very smart move on his part, because I'm sure that some of us young guys would have gotten out there with an airplane and made a fool of ourselves and maybe hurt someone. So that was a very calm day, and nothing I could do there. On VJ Day, I was very fortunate. I was home back in Steubenville with my wife and with my son, and enjoying a peaceful day. VJ Day happened, and then the next day I got a call from the military, said that I had enough points because we gained points due to our activities and how many combat missions we flew, how many years we had in the service, that I had enough points that I could be released from the military. I didn't particularly want to go, but Billy was so happy that I could get out of the military and come back home. And she was so thrilled, and I was so pleased to be with her that I decided to get out, which I did. I did spend a short bit of time in Ohio. She realized it, and I realized it, that I was not happy on the ground. And she said, "You've got to go back." So I went back and started training jet pilots for Korea. For Korea, I trained jet fighter pilots. For Vietnam, I trained jet instructor fighter pilots. And then I developed a gunship called the Shadow, the C-119 gunship, which came after the C-47 gunship and just prior to the C-130 gunship. Now, the 130 is called the Scepter, and we were called the Shadow. With that airplane, we could make one 360-degree turn around a football stadium and put one cannon shell in every square foot. So it was a very rapid-firing equipment that we had. And that was the last thing I did particularly. I also was a operations officer and sometime commander of the 908 Troop Carrier Group that was based at Bates Field in Mobile, Alabama, and later transferred to Brooklyn Air Force Base in Mobile. After 26 years of my association with the military, I retired from that and reported to the Atlanta, Georgia, to the FAA, and was an FAA inspector for 14 years. Started off in general aviation, went to air carrier, specializing in Boeing 727s, DC-9s and Convaires, and accident investigation, and building airlines. I built airlines, and I retired from that in January of 1982. And on a Friday and the following Wednesday, I was flying a Boeing 720 to Aruba, working for a travel club called the Atlanta Skylarks. Did that for 3.5 years, became a consultant for several years, and then just sort of spooled down, going from the highly active to the less active and down to no active. In the meantime, I was flying the EAA B-17 during that particular period, which I flew this airplane for 23 years. I didn't want to fly B-17s initially. I wanted to fly P-38s. But once I got to the airplane and saw what it did and what it could do and what I could do with it, and I developed an affection for it. I loved the feeling of the power. And I knew we had a job to do, and let's get on with it. And later, as time went on, as I flew the airplane in training and later in combat, I saw what kind of damage the airplane could sustain and stay in the air. Thank God it was made with a slide rule and not a computer, or it wouldn't be flying today, I don't suppose. But they built a fantastic airplane, and no, we had many people come back on 2 engines, come back with no rudder, parts of the wing shot off, holes in the fuselage that you could walk from the radio room right out on the wing, survived mid-air collisions with German fighters, flew the airplane back to, not myself, but other people flew the airplane back to home base, and as they were taxiing in, the airplane broke in two. So the idea that this airplane could take that much punishment and still provide protection to the crew you develop a certain admiration, a certain love for it. And after coming back to the States and flying on tour like I have for many years, it meant a lot to me in the fact that in some way I was representing some of my friends and some of the people that flew the bomber that I did not know, of course, and just bringing it around and showing to people. Some people hadn't seen the airplane for 50 or 55 years, and they some of them came out of the airplane with smiles on their face, and some old guys like me would come out of the airplane with tears running down their cheeks of the memories that they had and the friends and the people that they had lost. And it has been a wonderful experience for me, because brought it all back around to so many people that were so involved with the airplane. Because remember, in a fighter, this is all great, but there's one pilot and several mechanics on the ground supporting it. But in a bomber, you had 10 people, and you had 4 officers and 6 enlisted personnel, and they came from all over the United States. And so everybody knows somebody or had a relative that flew in a bomber, whether it was a B-29, a B-24, a B-17, or a B-25, B-26s. They had multiple personnel. And we were distributed all over the United States. And to go back into those areas and show the airplane as well kept and as beautiful as this airplane is, show it to these people again, they were thrilled and I was thrilled for them. My experience was with training cadets from the Naval Academy, or officers from the Naval Academy, officers from the Military Academy at West Point. I was involved in the first personnel and the first people, and started with the Air Force Academy when it was in Denver till it moved to Colorado Springs. And so, no, the military would be a high point, but not World War II in itself. I gained an awful lot of experience in World War II. I'm grateful for the people that I worked with on my crew. I'm grateful for the people in France that protected me and aided me. But I'm just grateful for everything and everybody, because when you're 84 years old, you're grateful for most everything. But the feeling of comradeship, the feeling of unity, the feeling of this is my country and I'm proud to be a part of it, I just don't feel it. And as I mentioned yesterday, every time I have a talk with anybody, the last thing I say is, God bless America.
Most people in aviation have heard the story of the two airplanes that got hung together on a bombing mission over Germany. Well, I was in Allegheny Airport in Pittsburgh, and this gentleman was standing there, tall gentleman, graying, had on a white dress shirt. In the middle of the summer, most people don't wear white dress shirts out to an air show. So I asked him if he was a World War II veteran. He said, yep. I said, what'd you do? And he said, well, I was the only 8-engine biplane pilot in the Army Air Corps. Well, I immediately knew the story, but I didn't know it all. So he told me the story. He was flying the planes, and they were in what they call the combat box, which took full advantage of all the guns against the fighters. One of them got shot down, and so he moved up to fill in the hole in the combat box. Well, somebody else moved too. The two tails stuck together, and they couldn't get apart. Some of the engines hit each other, so there was only one engine that was putting out much power. There was another engine running a little bit, but only one on the lower airplane, when they were stuck together, was putting out full power, and another one putting out partial power. He was the pilot of the upper airplane. He turned it back toward Germany because it was going down. It was going, and there was no way they were going to make it back to England. And he told anybody who wanted to bail out, they could. Well, one crewman bailed out. He was lost in the North Sea. They never heard from him again. The ball turret retracted up into the plane so that if it had to make a belly landing, it was going to kill the ball turret gunner. And they couldn't get it up. They couldn't get him out. The system was broken, and they knew he was going to die. And they were talking to him. He understood. That was war. The airplanes hit, top airplane slid off the other one, and they both slid to a stop. And the Germans had been following them back in the fighters. So they were all put in captivity because they thought it was a secret weapon. But it was just an accident. And to me, it's particularly significant because he died 2 weeks later. So I think I'm probably the last person who heard that story truly from the horse's mouth.
By itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
I got drafted. I got called back to Brooklyn, New York. At that time, I was pushing about 17 and a half. When I got into the Army, they give you an IQ test. And mine was I don't know how this sounds, but mine was high. So they said, where do you want to go? I said, well, no, I want to be a pilot. So, and the truth is, I didn't know anything about it any more than whatever. So when I went in there, they gave me an eye test, and they said, you can't be a pilot because you're colorblind. So, but he says, don't worry, we're going to put you up in the air anyway. We're going to make you an armor gunner. Little did I know that they were losing crews, the hundreds and thousands, you know, what was going on. Germans were shooting our planes, the bombers down at a fast rate, but I didn't know that, or I would have run the other way. to get a crew together, was in Tampa. If I remember the sequence, they sent us to Tampa, where they picked us up, picked different people to be for a crew. Then they sent us to Georgia here somewhere. I don't know what the field was in Georgia. And picked up a plane. From there we flew up along the coast of US, and we stopped at Bangor, Maine. And we stayed overnight there, froze our behinds off, it was so cold. And then from there, a day later, we went to Newfoundland. And I remember how dark and rainy it was, because it was nighttime when we got there. It was terrible looking, And we landed there, went to chow, and then the next morning we took off for England. And we landed, everybody went separate. It was not as a team effort. It was just every ship on their own. We landed in Scotland. They had just gotten paid. And we joined in. We lost all our money, except Fluger, the one that I mentioned once before. Fluger was on a winning streak. So fantastic that when it was all done, the game was over and Simon says, I'm going. Everybody in the crew was holding pound notes like this. That's how he started his European invasion with. But this is really true. So, and I don't know what he did with it because we didn't ask. Only that it was a great plane, and we all knew it, because some of our planes came back, the tail either missing or half or this and that, or big pieces out. That plane always brought us back, and we all knew it. The name of our plane was, I always forget, so I wrote it down this morning so I wouldn't forget, the Blind Date. That was the name of our plane. That lasted for the 6 or 7 years that we were as a crew. After that it was different. There was 2 missions here, 3 missions here, stuff like that. So, but they were all nice, even though I wasn't friends with anybody because I didn't know them. But it was fine. What I had to do, being the armorer and taking the pins out of the nose of the bombs, and I was really scared. I have to tell you, I was scared to death. I think that was probably about my first mission, second mission, whatever. We're going, and I have a pliers in my pocket because I have to take the cotter pins out of the nose of the bombs. They had a cotter pin, you know what they are. It's because if I didn't have them out when the bomb hit the nose. So I remember looking down. I was scared to death, and I was saying to him, after I did all of this, I called up the lieutenant, the bombardier. I said, "Look, Lieutenant," I said, "what's going to happen if when I pull those pins out, the bomb goes off?" He said, "Sergeant, you'll never feel a thing." So we went into the radio room, and we always had a box of chaff there that once in a while, for whatever reason, they used to empty it and throw it out at the radio room. They had a hatch. Throw it out of the radio room, and it used to make the radar, the German radar, the ack guns. It used to. So he did his thing in the box, in this big box, put it on the walkway of the Bombay. We went for our mission. We went in on our way. Bombay doors opened up. The box came out, hit the belly turret, splattered it with whatever was in there. And then, I'm glad she reminded me, because I got a call from Kaminsky. He says, "Billy, get me out of here, get me out of here. I'm full of blood, I'm bleeding, I can't see." So I said, okay, I unhooked my suit and everything. I got there, got him out, looked him over, nothing was wrong. I said, "Kaminsky, nothing's wrong." I got him back in there. Afterwards, we found out what Henderson did. I already had a cleanup job to do when we got down. But that really happened. On one of the missions, we were heading for takeoff, and I looked out. First of all, I told you that I had looked up and the sky was just loaded with 17s and 24s, and I looked back into the plane and see the line up and back me of all these planes slowly moving up for takeoff, and how I felt, that feeling of awe that I had and love for our country with this at this time. I am still that way. I still think of our country that way. I love the country. Always did and always will. It was an amazing sight to see all the planes, B-17s and B-24s, that were flying. The sky was packed with planes to go on this mission. Very awe-inspiring. You have to fly around little by little and everybody taking their own space and be very careful that not into another group. Yeah. And then on their way, I was, since I was waist, and we didn't have anything, it was open. There was no plexiglass. So I just stand there. You have to stand. I was lucky, I had flat feet. I was the only one that stood in the ship. I just passed the time away thinking of what I had to do. I have to admit that I wasn't scared. I don't think anybody really was until we were actually into it. What it was when we were actually on the bomb run with the bombs coming up and the big puffs of smoke out there and everything. It's scary, but everybody did their job. We had a great crew. Got hit with a piece of flak, put me down. I was hanging onto the machine gun. I was on my knee, and we got through the mission. You know, when we came down, I told my tail gunner, Len Pfluger, I said, "Len, don't let them put me in the ambulance because they'll take me away to the hospital and I won't be able to. Maybe they'll stop me from flying because I want to keep flying." So he took me to the infirmary, taped me up, and brought me back. And that started my problems as to the VA taking care of me, because they wouldn't, because they didn't have a record of me, because at the infirmary they didn't do anything but take me and send me on my way. I was always sore in my sternum after that for years, always. I couldn't lift. I never knew what the reason was, that I always had a pain when I used to lift. But that was the reason, because I got hit up there. And I think that was either my 6th or 7th mission. When we got down, I said to Pfluger, my tail gunner, he picked up, I have a piece of flak like this, I'll say about 2 inches long, that hit me and knocked me down. I was the youngest on the crew. I was 18 by the time I was probably 19 by the time I was in combat. I flew 15 missions, okay, with the crew. But I got to about the 7th mission. They left us alone to drink a little and have good times and so forth and so on. And we were making a lot of noise, upsetting a lot of crews, making noise because we didn't have anything to do for a while the officers were busy doing what they were doing. In fact, Kennedy's brother was killed on one of those missions that my officers went on. They had what they call a mother and a baby. They took B-17s, stripped them, put dynamite in the baby, and with a unit where the mother could take them off. And in fact, my co-pilot, when he bailed out, he hit the tail of the plane, and he was lucky he made it down alive, but he had a scar on his face for the rest of his life because of that. They sent me because I told the sergeant when he came in, we were making noise, I told him, "Sarge, bring the mail with you the next time." He sent me out to where the mechanics do the work. After a month or so of that, I got a call. "We're training you we want you to become a bombardier." So I said, "Oh, okay, whatever." And they didn't really train me as a bombardier, but they showed me how to push all the toggle ships, toggles, to open the doors, to drop the bombs, everything, And not too long of training, and I became a toggleier. Yeah, I was a toggleier because I toggle switch. When we were flying, most of the planes, maybe there was one with the bomb sight. After that, everybody dropped when they dropped. When I flew, at this point, they didn't know what to do with me. And every time, let's say, somebody was killed in a ship, or whatever happened to them, they sent me in I did a replacement for, probably for about 6, 7, 8 missions, whatever. And I know that, and I remember, I did many times, I was a guy that dropped the bombs because they didn't always have somebody that knew how to do this. So my last 2 missions were over Berlin. I know going there and coming back, we were called stragglers. Our plane couldn't keep up with the rest of the bombers for whatever reason. My last 2 missions was that way. So on that first time it happened, about 6 or 7 other 17s and came up in back of us, and we led the way into Berlin. And I watched where they had a flare up there. When they dropped, they had a flare up. When I thought we reached the flare, that's when I dropped. And and briefing, they told me that we did hit the target. And then right after that, I don't remember exactly when, but we went to Berlin again, the second time. This time, straggler again. And we made it. And on the way back, 2 other planes came up to us, with me being the lead, and then another one to the side. And just as the third one came in, and you don't fly like this, you fly here, there. That's how it looks different, but you're at different levels when you're flying. And the third one went under, got hit with a bomb, exploded under us, and our pilot had to fight the plane, fight the plane to right it so that we could go on, and then we came back. Well, I always told God God, please, don't let me get killed. Many times I said that. God, please don't let me get killed. I'll be a good person all my life, and things like that. And many times on a mission, when I thought about it, God was always in my mind that he helped us. When we got done with the mission many times, I said to myself, God was there. He was always there for me, always. And I always wrote it the same way, because I actually feel that way. I'm not religious, but I know there's a God above us. And I've always been a good person, before that and then. And he always took care of me, always. Was never on a mission that the big black puffs were coming up and all of us. Many times we had to go through it. Instead of going around the flak area, this was on a line with a trajectory of the trip. We were taken straight in to the target. So I don't know if I prayed or not, but I knew we were going, and I'm sure everybody else did. Whatever I thought, everybody thought the same way, believe me. Like you said before, there's no atheists in the foxhole. Yep. I know after the war, I had a cousin that was in infantry. He went through with Patton, from start to finish with Patton, and went through all kinds of things and had loads of stories and this and that. And I said to him, you know, we were talking, this was after the war, and he said to me, you know, we always used to look up there and see what was going on with you guys and saying, you poor bastards up there, you have no place to run. And I would say to him, we would look down there and we were saying the same thing about you. After my missions, they didn't know what to do with us. They didn't know what to do with us. They sent me to Laredo, Texas. They said, you're going to teach gunnery. They taught me about skeet. I was good for 25 out of 25. I was really good at it. And when that was, it wasn't quite over, when the news came out that they were going to send us, first they said, after this, at a certain time, they were going to send us home. It was time to go home. And then all of a sudden, they said, no, we need it. 29s are going to Japan. We have the war in Japan to take care of. So you people, all of you are going to go to Japan on this. It took probably about 2 days or so, and Truman dropped the bomb. That's when he dropped the bomb, and everybody said, thank God, we won't go in there. Now they're going to send me back home. They send me back home. I had enough points. You know, they went by how many points you have overseas, certain amount of points, how many missions you flew, et cetera, until I had a lot of missions, a lot of points. So they sent me home on a troop ship. If I remember, Kaiser was building those troop ships. Sent me home on one of them. We're on our way over when they got news that a sub was following us, even if the war was over. Now the war was over, and there's this sub out there watching us. But I used to go up on top. The first thing we did anyway, when we got in the ship, everybody went shoot craps to see how much money they could lose. Me being one of them. And then I would go up on the deck. Every day I went up on deck and watched those tremendous waves that looked like they would consume us. Got home, Newport News, Virginia. First thing I did, go into a telephone, Mom, I'm home. Go out of the booth, my flight bag is gone. Somebody had a better shot at it than I did. So it wasn't until later I got to Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn and got a set of clothes to wear. But I remember, didn't forget that one. They were all waiting for me. I got home and Everybody was there. It was packed with people. I lived in Seagate, Brooklyn, New York. A small 1 square mile, big mansions and stuff that we would buy one here and one there and turn them into rooming houses. That's how we made a living. I could have gone to 3 different colleges when I got out. I had enough, when I got out of school, I had enough. I could go anywhere I wanted. In the time that I was overseas, I was always gambling. When I wasn't flying, I was at the latrine, cards or dice, and I was lucky, and I sent home. Every time I'd win that day, I'd go into the post office and send the money home to my mother, because I know that she was at least once a month, she would send a big carton loaded with food and delicacies and everything, and everybody in the crew enjoyed. She said to me, Billy, Dave wants to go into a business. He found a business he would like to go into, but he needs a partner. I says, Mom, I don't have any money. She says, yes, you do. I said, where did I get it? She says, I saved the money. She had $750 for me. Do you know what that $750 was worth in 1945? I got out in 1945. And that was my half a down payment to the business. What I did was an important part of tomorrow for the youthful youngsters that were coming up, that they had to see where they came from. I think it was a very important thing to do, because the truth is, when you talk to the young people today, they probably don't even know there's a World War II. They just don't know anything what went on before. I don't know why, because they don't teach them. There's no history in school anymore. The background, it's important that they know where they come from. Not only what they came from overseas, because I can tell you right now, I know where I came from, where my people came from. Believe it or not, Siberia. I wanted you to see what the B-17 looked like, but I did want you to walk in it and walk in my shoes. Wanted you to walk in my shoes to see what I put in 8 and 10 hour, 11 hours a mission. We got the best country in the whole world. It's the most wonderful, wonderful place that people overseas, people in other countries, they don't even know. They only hear what they think, but they don't know what this is. They don't know because they never had this. All they had were dictators with their hand over their heads to make them do things that they shouldn't be doing, starving them, killing them, and all these kinds of things. We don't have that here. What I did, if that's part of what they're going to get in history lessons, I'm very happy with it. I won't go there like this, but I got about 5 or 6 years to go yet. I'm going to be 100, and I'm going to make it. My mother made 100, and when I was in my 50s, she said, Billy, you're going to live longer than I will. So I tell everybody, be good to me, and I'm going to drag you along with me on my way to 100. See, well, I'm going to make 100, and I'm going to look back at these kids and other things with the help of God. It's there for me to see, and hopefully this place is still here doing as great as actually it is doing. It is doing great, but better and better. So war is, like they say, is hell. And the people in it, there's always take something away, either a part of them taken away or other things that are not particularly desirable that's left with them. You know, they have troubles. Overall, I've handled it pretty good. And if I didn't, those kids would not let me live. They were good kids. They all had a good education. Gave them a good education. They all knew right from wrong, and they do. And they made a happy time for me in my life.
My name is Connie Boland. I'm the founder and now the coordinator of Warbirds in Review. I say I'm the coordinator, but it takes all these other people. And this one right here is Kyle. Kyle is the one who coordinates and takes care of all of our presenters, and I've just embarrassed her, and that's perfect. Kyle, I personally thank you, and EA Warbirds of America, thank you for all that you do. Thank you. And the rest of the team, her husband Scott is in the control room. Do we have the shot of the control room? Yes. There's the rest of the sleeping dog team. There's Andy, Lance, and Scott with the orange hat on. I don't know, he thinks he's going hunting or something in that end that he doesn't want to get shot at. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a terrific team here of professionals. They live stream this event, and the crowds this week, the shows have been pretty phenomenal. And as the crowd lessens, we've had a lot of airplane owners go home, a lot of visitors, but I know it's been a terrific week here for everybody. It's been our pleasure to present the Warbirds in Review shows every day, and I've seen a lot of the same faces out in the audience all week. And to Scott's Miracle Grow, who makes this possible through their, they are the sustaining main sponsor for this event, and that this is all funded directly from a Warbirds in Review budget. It's not supported by EAA, and we do all of this with all the volunteers here. So thank you for showing up to be a part of this. Thank you very much. And that production room you saw behind me in the green room that has our presenters preparing for this event. The building is courtesy of Ron and Diane Fagan. Those of you who've been here all week, you've heard me thank them in the past. They're huge Warbird supporters. Fagan Fighters World War II Museum in Granite Falls, Minnesota. If you ever have an opportunity, you should visit their museum. They're true patriotic people and preserving our history, and we're glad that have them a part of this team. Today's show presentation is in recognition of the 75th anniversary of the Air Force. And we have these airplanes here representing the Air Force. But the real special treat is that we have a 100-year-old gentleman who flew B-17s in World War II. So without further ado, I won't take any more of your time. It will be presented and moderated by General Ed McElhenney, retired, and Sam Bass will join him here in just a few minutes with our main speaker. And we have a video now, if you will direct your attention to the Jumbotron, and then I'll turn it over to the real people, the heroes of this presentation. Thank you.
Major John Lucky Luckadoo's last combat mission, 25 in all, as a B-17 pilot was on February 13, 1944. He was only 22, yet older beyond his years. Today, Lucky is 100 years old. In his spare time, he speaks with middle and high school students about his experience in the war. He said he wants everyone, especially young people, to remember a life lesson he's valued over the last century. That is, to live each day to its fullest, because it may be your last. Luckadoo goes by Lucky, a nickname he earned while piloting his plane through the Luftwaffe machine gun fire and anti-aircraft flak in sub-zero temperatures on bombing runs over Nazi-occupied France and Germany. He is the last living original B-17 pilot of the 8th Air Force's 100th bomb group known as the Bloody Hundredth. Lucky said he retired multiple B-17s that only held together long enough to get him back to the ground, once with his frostbitten feet frozen to the airplane pedals after another high-altitude mission. He said, "The bottom line is it doesn't matter how skilled you are or how well you perform your function, but that you're just extremely, incredibly lucky to survive."
Thank you all.
Thank you, folks.
If y'all been here during the week, you'll know that this is my 9th and final production of Warbirds in Review, and I thank y'all for being here. I hope you have safe travels home, but the reason we're here today, it was kind of interesting. Connie and I talked about this a while back, and we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the United States Air Force. But then she says, oh, and by the way, we've got this guest who's going to be here, whose name is Luckadoo, and yeah, he was a member of the 100th Bomb Group, B-17, and I'm kind of going, Connie, I said, well, we can't do all of this. We can do a part of it, but we can't do all of it. And she said, okay, you're the moderator, you decide. And so I have decided. So I'm going to briefly touch on the United States Air Force and its inception back in 1947. But the whole key is this man that's sitting right there right now. And we're going to open that up to some questions from Sam Bass. If you probably recognize him also. He's been up here as a moderator for years. But the reason I put him up here this time is because Lucky and I were talking yesterday, and Sam got involved. And I said, Sam, you've got a lot of time in a B-17, and he flew the B-17 for 20 years. He was flying the EAA B-17, so he's kind of a B-17 expert of sorts, not like Lucky at altitude, etc. But I said, Sam, we need to do a tag team here, so that's what we're going to do. We're on a tight time schedule today, so at 11 o'clock we're going to end up having to thank Lucky, and he's going to head back to the book signing back there, and then I have to pass on that there's another individual who we were notified that this guy was going to show up and had expressed an interest in coming to see Warbirds, and his name is C.Q. Brown. And if you all don't recognize the name, put a general in front of that, and you'll go, oh yeah, General Brown, the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. He is going to be here today, not for this presentation, but he expressed an interest when he found out that Lucky was going to be here, and Lucky says, yeah, okay, I think I can fit him into my schedule. So Lucky's going to fit the Chief of Staff of the Air Force into his schedule here lately. We had a little different plan in terms of aircraft, but originally it was going to be a PT-17 Stearman. That's kind of how the Air Force began way back when. And we were going to have an A-10. Well, we really wanted the F-35, but he's parked over there somewhere to indicate, hey, kind of, the beginning and where we're at right now with the 5th generation fighters. As you can see, things have changed here a little bit. We got an F-5 over to my right. We got a T-33 over here, and that still gives you an indication of, hey, where our Air Force has been, if you will. Yeah, the Stearman would have been nice, and you probably got some Stearman time, didn't you, Lucky?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so that's how that started. And oh, by the way, and we'll talk about it later, he was one of the first members of the, quote, real Air Force back then, 1947. He was a member, he started out in the Army Air Corps, and then, hey, next thing you know, he's into the United States Air Force. And as long as we're talking about aircraft, we're still working on a thank you for the F-5, but I heard that they're in the audience, and Kathy Tyler and Steve Jones, are you in the audience? There we go, right there. They are the owners of this beautiful T-33 up here. So thank you very much for allowing us to borrow it for an hour here or so. We really do appreciate that very much. And with that, I'll say, yeah, 1947, that's when, hey, they finally decided that, hey, the Army can't handle it, the Navy can't handle it, we need to start a special branch of service, and they did. And that's when the United States Air Force started. Yeah, it's gone on from there with a variety of airplanes. Like I said, we're up to the 5th generation fighter now. The bombers are they're still working on the latest and greatest after the B-2, and I'll say from an experience standpoint, yeah, I'm a B-1 pilot for a little while, and it was fun, it was great, but hey, they're at the next iteration from there. And on the fighter side of things, yeah, that 5th generation F-22 and F-35 is really nice, but and I talked to Ben, our ground handler here. I said, what we really need out here is another airplane that would fit very easily out here. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, the prediction right now is 40% of the United States Air Force is going to be flown with these types of airplanes in the future. And he says, what are you talking about? And if y'all don't know, hey, I'm talking about drones, okay? And drones are out there, and they're going to be more and more of our fighting force. Why? Because it doesn't take our pink bodies here and put them into close combat and battle. But yeah, we're working on getting either a Predator or a Reaper out here next year, so you can kind of see, hey, hey, this is where we're going. Mission of the Air Force, fly and fight. Don't you ever forget it. That was something that that I learned way back when. I'm a product of the Air Force, if you will. I went to the Air Force Academy. I did graduate. I wasn't at the top of my class, but I graduated. And it was a good thing. Turned into a fighter pilot. They taught me how to fly. And as I said, I was an F-4 guy, an F-16 guy, a B-1 guy, airline guy a little bit, Air National Guard. And thank you very much for having that. I think it's a Texas Air National Guard sticker on the back of that. Yeah, I'm a Guard guy from way back also. So thank you for having that there. Again, mission, fly and fight. As far as I was concerned, no, the mission of the Air Force was to beat Army and beat Navy in the football games. And I still think that way. But no, one team, one fight, as they say. And indeed, we are one team out there. Like I say, the Air Force, I could go on and on to talk about it. Something I did learn, and if you don't know the motto of the Air Force, integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. Those are three things that were put into our minds way back when, and I got to say, it's something I never forgot. In addition to an honor code that we learned at the Air Force Academy, don't lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate anybody amongst us, and that has served me well over my almost 70 years right now. So yeah, this is some of the airplanes. This is some of the history. But what I'm going to do now is get into Lucky and what this man did. He does have a book just recently published. When I found out that he was going to be here, I got it. I read it. I think I read it in about 3 or 4 hours. That's how it gained my attention and kept my attention. The name of it is Damn Lucky. And this is a man who got 25 missions in the B-17 in the bloody 100th. He went to war, as I remember, what was it, with a Bible in your flight jacket?
Flight suit.
In his flight suit and a white scarf, okay? And I think he'll be the first to recognize that, yeah, he's a lucky man to be here. He's here for a reason, though. The big guy upstairs said, no, Lucky, hey, I'm going to keep you around a while so that you can do stuff like this. And we thank him and we thank you for being here and allowing us to talk to you a little bit about that.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to sit down now and just talk a little bit about first how you got into it. You were in college, as I remember, and you and a close friend named Sully decided that you wanted to get into it. And how did that all work out?
Well, actually, when we graduated from high school together as best friends, and Sully and I both wanted to learn to fly, we knew that the storm clouds over Germany and Europe were going to ultimately affect us in the States, that we would be prime candidates to serve if it and when it did. And the smartest thing, the coolest thing that we thought we could do was to go to Canada and learn to fly, get our commissions, and then when ultimately America was involved in the Second World War, that we would then be able to transfer to the Army Air Corps, as it was then, in grade, already be trained, and would be a step or two ahead of our buddies. That seemed to be a very logical and astute way of coping with circumstances at the time. We had entered college together, fraternity brothers together, and so we applied to Canada, and they welcomed us with both arms. and said, sure, you guys come on up. We'll be happy to train you. But since you're underage, we will require parental consent. Well, it so happened that Sully was an only child. His dad had been involved in the First World War, had been horribly mustard gassed, and died a terrible death before Sully even knew him. So he was all his mother had. And when we presented the plan to her, she said, you know, Sully, if you really and honestly feel that this is what you must do, then you have my blessing. Consequently, I thought, likewise, my parents would view the situation pretty much in the same fashion. So when I presented it to my family and asked for their permission, my mother said, well, as long as Ms. Sullivan has seen fit to allow her only offspring to do this, I hate to see you do it, but I guess I would agree too. But your father will have to agree. And when he came home and he heard about it, he said, you blithering idiots don't have a cotton-picking idea of what you're doing or what you're getting into. Over my dead body would I ever give you my consent. So you get back in school. So consequently, I was unable to join Sully, but he did go to the Montreal and did get trained on Spitfires and went through the North African campaign successfully. And eventually, when Pearl Harbor occurred, there was no question about my service, and I didn't require parental consent. So I joined the Air Corps as an aviation cadet and was admitted and went to flight school.
Okay, there's more to that story, though, because you and Sully met up again several years later from what you said in your book, and I thought that was a very interesting meeting. How did that work out?
Indeed. Actually, he came up to, he was based back in England by the time I got there, and he came up one day to visit me in a Spitfire, and I took him up in a B-17 and showed him what it was like, put him in the cockpit, let him get the feel of the aircraft. And I don't know whether all of you are aware or not, but most people that go into the Air Force as pilots all want to be fighter pilots. They have all the fun. But he looked at me and he said, Buster, this ain't flying. You ain't nothing but a truck driver. And I said, well, Sully, we need truck drivers too in this war. And he said, well, you go ahead and land and you fly my Spit and you'll find out what flying is all about. And I said, nada, nada, nada. I'd kill myself. But he insisted. And foolishly, I got in his Spitfire, and he says it's just a piece of cake, which was a common expression for the Brits and the Canadians. He showed me the controls and everything, and he says, take her up. So foolishly I did. And of course, as you can tell, I'm here to tell the tale, but it was scary as all hell. And I barely got it around the pattern and gingerly put it back down on the ground without killing myself. And he said, now that's really flying. And I said, well, you got that right. So he invited me to come down and visit him at his base. And I was unable to do that because of I was later assigned the duties of operations officer of my squadron in addition to continuing to fly my missions. And so I was busier than a one-armed paper hanger, and couldn't get off for a month or two until I finally did wangle a test flight on a B-17, and I went down to his base, which was only about 30 miles away from mine, and squeezed that B-17 into a fighter field whose runways are only about half the length of the bomber bases. And as I was standing on the brakes to keep from running off the end of the runway, I looked off to the side, and here was a wreckage, still smoldering. And I didn't think too much about it, but I went on to the control tower, and the officer of the day came out and said, "Yank, what the heck are you doing here? You lost? You need petrol?" I said, no, I'm just on a social call to visit a friend of mine, Flight Lieutenant Sullivan. Would you kindly show me his quarters? And he said, well, you have to see the CO. And I said, well, I know that's protocol. When you land at a foreign base, you certainly report to the commanding officer and tell him why you're there. But I said, I am in a bit of a hurry, and I have to get back, and could you just please show me his quarters? And he said, no, you have to see the CO. And so I was ushered into the wing commander's office. I need to tell you that Sully had been transitioned from the Spitfire to the Hawker Typhoon, which was a vicious airplane. It was so overpowered that as you took off, the torque was so strong that it pulled the aircraft to the side, and you had to take off with full opposite rudder. Unfortunately, the afternoon before, Sully was on takeoff with his wingman on a rhubarb, which was a strafing mission in that Typhoon. He got about 50 feet in the air and his engine quit, and he just cartwheeled in. And that was his wreckage that I had viewed when I landed. And he informed me that he was in the process of notifying his mother, his next of kin, and he wanted me to do it. And I said, well, sir, with all due respect, he was not flying for the Air Force. He was flying for you. He was under your command. It's your responsibility. He said, I know that, but since you were his best friend, I certainly think she would appreciate getting that sad news from you rather than me. So I sat down and cabled her and had to inform her that Sully had died. I tell you that story because the loss of a friend in combat is quite different than it is in civilian life. There is usually no funeral. There's no memorial. There's no reference whatsoever to the fact that they were gone. But when they're shot down, all you have are 10 empty bunks in the barracks. However, in this case, where I lost my best friend, there was a funeral, which I had to attend and did. And Sully is buried and still in Brookwood Cemetery. But that loss was more profound to me than any of the others comrades that I ever flew with in World War II.
That's tough. even my condolences now. I'm sorry that you lost your best friend. I'll open up to Sam now. Another B-17 pilot. I'm sure he's ready.
Well, speaking of the losses, and tell us why they called it the Bloody 100th.
Sam, there were several reasons. Basically, we got the moniker of the Bloody 100th because of our extreme losses. We went over in the spring of 1943. Flew our aircraft, brand new B-17Fs, across the North Atlantic before we had any fighter escort. And the only escort we got was from the RAF, who could carry us just to the enemy coast, and then they were out of fuel and had to return. So our heaviest losses, we did not end up in the 8th Air Force as the bomber group with the heaviest losses overall, but we were darn close to it. I think we were second or third. But initially, when we lost big. And the Germans, we did not have any idea that we were going to be confronted with the professional Luftwaffe quality of pilots that we encountered. And when we arrived in England, Axis Sally came on the radio and said, "Welcome to the war, Hundredth. You've made the biggest mistake in your lives, coming here and entering a war that's none of your business. But now that you're here, we are going to teach you a lesson." And by God, they did. Believe me. Because they were professionals. They'd been fighting for 4 years when we got there. They were battle tested. They had excellent equipment, better than ours. And they were fighting for their homeland. And we were miles away from ours. So they had a different incentive altogether.
Right. Well, now you're speaking of the experience of the Luftwaffe. What was your experience when you trained in the United States? You transitioned into the B-17. How much time did you have when you flew your first mission?
Well, Sam, that's a strange story because another unusual thing that happened in the 100th, which did not happen in any other group in the 8th Air Force, was after the group had already gone through their pre-combat training for months. They took 40 of us from my flying school class in Valdosta, Georgia, 43B, sent us to Kearney, Nebraska to join the 100th Bomb Group to replace all of their co-pilots. They literally pulled all of the co-pilots out of the right seats, signed them new crews and to other groups as replacements, and put us brand new qualified pilots, multi-engine pilots, but never having been in a B-17 or a 4-engine airplane before, into the right seat as co-pilots. And as you may or may not know, the co-pilot is the second in command of the crew, 10-man crew. So if the pilot is incapacitated for any reason, the co-pilot becomes the airplane crew commander. And they put us in that position. So they pulled us together and assigned us new aircraft, had been modified with Tokyo tanks, and sent us to combat.
And how much time did you have? You said,
And
what,
at
220
that time,
hours?
At that time, when I landed in Newfoundland on our way over, I had a total of about 20 hours in the B-17 going to combat.
How about your class of 40? How many made it back out of your class of 40?
Ultimately, 4 out of the 40 completed a tour.
Mm-hmm.
Your choices were either to be shot down, captured, killed, or luckily get home.
What was the worst mission that you flew in terms of aircraft losses? I remember one particular one that a normal number went out and very few returned.
Exactly. In October of 1943, the original crew that I had gone overseas with had completed 25 missions, but I did not. They had a standard operating procedure, SOP, that if your crew led the group formation, that the co-pilot was replaced by a command pilot, and the co-pilot went back and flew the tail gun position. So they put me in the tail. Never fired a .50 caliber in my life. And that was a stupid, that was military intelligence for you. That was a stupid idea. I'd like to get my hands on the guy that dreamed that one up. But anyway, they were supposed to be the fire control officer as a pilot in the tail of the lead airplane. Well, what was completely ignored was that the tail gunner had no communication with anybody else in the entire formation. He could only communicate with the pilot on intercom. And then the pilot had to switch channels and notify the rest of the formation about whatever danger he was reporting. And by then it was all over, so it was useless. But anyway, when I got back after that first mission, I said, Luckadoo ain't getting in the tail again, ever. Take my wings or court-martial me or do whatever you have to, but I'm not getting in the tail. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never had any gunner experience. And they said, well, okay, you'll have to sit on the ground. So that's why I didn't finish up with the original crew. They did the fastest tour in the 8th Air Force. And they completed their 25 missions, luckily, in 91 days.
Mm-hmm. But back to that one mission, as I remember, did 12 airplanes launch and only 2 or 4 come back? I can't remember exactly.
I got sidetracked, Ed. Thank you. My worst mission turned out to be the first one I flew after the crew that I had flown 21 missions with went home. And I was then an instructor pilot with a brand new crew. And we were, it was the beginning of what became known as Black Week in the 8th Air Force. On October the 8th of 1943, our target was Bremen, almost as deeply into Germany as Berlin. And on that occasion, we sent out 18 airplanes. And the Luftwaffe was so aggressive and were pressing their attack so viciously that for the first time we had ever experienced it, they were literally flying through their own flak. Normally, when we turned on the initial point or the bomb run to drop our bombs, the fighters would leave us alone and allow the anti-aircraft to hopefully damage us enough to force us out of the formation. And then they would pick us up as we came off the target and attack the stragglers and the But normally they didn't fly through their own flak, but over Bremen they did. And as a result, we were experiencing mid-air collisions. They were actually impacting our aircraft, ramming us. My right wingman was rammed and blew up. The plane in front of me was rammed and it blew up. And on the bomb run, out of the 18 aircraft that had started out in the 100th Bomb Group, 12 were shot down, shot out of the formation. Several of them did make it back, but I brought the remains of what was in the formation home by attaching to a second wave of bombers behind us with 6 ships. The next day, our mission was to Marienburg, and the 100th sent out 18 airplanes and got back 9. The third day, we went to Munster, and as the book reveals, a fellow named Rosenthal, who was a replacement pilot in our group, ended up flying over more than 2 missions, 2 tours. But we could only put up 13 aircraft over Munster. Rosie was the only airplane to return.
Now, part of that week was the raid to Schweinfurt. Is that correct? On Thursday, the raid to Schweinfurt on October the 14th.
The 14th, yes, that was the end of the Black Week.
And that was the whole group lost 60 airplanes. That's correct.
Well, the entire formation. Right. That was the wing lost 60 airplanes on that mission.
Now I understand that they changed their tactics after that. That you were not to go any further than where you could have escort. Is that correct?
No. We didn't change our tactics until Doolittle assumed command of the 8th Air Force, and that was in January, the following January 1st, when he cut the fighters loose from escorting and said, "You go down and catch the Germans on take-up before they can get off the ground and stop all this dogfighting, and it'll be more effective," and it proved to be.
Just a quick side note, a typical mission. How high were you? How cold was it? Physiologically, I'm sure a lot of people probably don't put themselves in that position, but a typical mission, how high were you guys flying?
Well, that's a very important question because it had more effect on our ability to bomb, to perform, than any other factor. And that was because the B-17 was totally unpressurized. In order to survive at altitude, we had to be on supplemental oxygen. And we normally bombed between 25 and 29,000 feet. The temperatures at that altitude.
We got a flyby for you, by the way.
There's a B-17.
There's a B-17 right there. Perfect timing.
We programmed that.
Thank you.
All right, so there you are at altitude.
The bitter cold that we endured at high altitude because we were unpressurized was unbelievable. It was 50 to 60 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. And this so affected our ability to perform that we were practically frozen stiff. And yet, strangely enough, in the heat of battle, when the fighters are coming in, the flak is coming up, and you're struggling and your best to maintain your position in the formation, you suddenly, as a pilot, discovered you're perspiring profusely. and that perspiration freezes instantly. And what that does is create ice crystals in your flow of oxygen. The moisture does. And so you're ending up trying to crack up ice crystals with one hand and fly the damn airplane with the other. So the cold, and for hours on end, and mind you, on in the waist gun position on a B-17, where these poor gunners are standing there in an open window on the side of the aircraft with a single 50 caliber machine gun. In that wind and that cold, we had tremendous injuries from frostbite. Mm-hmm. 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 And my only physical injury in my entire tour was when I had a hole knocked in the nose, plexiglass nose, and this jet of cold air was hitting my feet. And they froze my feet to the rudders. And luckily, I did not lose my toes, but that was just another case where I was damn lucky.
To backtrack just a little bit here, and you do your initial training over here in the States on the B-17. You're a crew. You're all together in this crew. You come over and you're enthusiastic about flying your first mission. But you fly that first mission and then you come back and now here are all these empty bunks. How do you program yourself to where you can do 24 more?
Sam, I've been asked that question before several times. And when I try to rationalize on it or think of what our mindsets were and how we psyched ourselves up to get back in that airplane the next day, I honestly don't know. I only know that in order to do it, you had to stay focused on your mission and had to believe that you'd survive. But at 20, 21 years old, you're a hair-headed college kid. You don't know from nothing, but you think you're the smartest guy in the world. When I look back on it now, from 100 years, it occurs to me that my going to war and putting myself on the line day after day under those circumstances was not the smartest thing I ever did.
Well, you mentioned yesterday that war changes. You don't come out of the war
exactly
the same. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Whether you're in the Air Force and flying or whether you're in the trenches in the Army, nobody goes to war and gets shot at and comes back the same person. And as we were writing this book, when I was collaborating with this writer, I said, I'm fully aware that there are two things that you can't possibly, as well as you can describe and put in narrative form what I experienced, you can't convey the real terror and horror of getting shot at, nor can you really convey adequately the bitter cold and its impact on us. But he did a very excellent job, I think, if you care to read the story, of describing pretty much what it was like to be in the bloody Hundredth.
All right, Lucky. I'm the rudder that's trying to steer this ship, and I've got about 9 minutes, so I'm going to save myself 1 minute at the end. And if there aren't questions, Sam and I are going to go at it again here for a minute. But I'm going to open it up to questions right now to see if there is anybody out there who wants to ask Lucky some questions. Go ahead.
Lucky, Lucky, you were talking yesterday about the head-on attacks by the Germans on the bomber squadrons. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Head-on attacks. He wants to know about head-on attacks by the ME-109s and the Focke-Wulfs,
Okay.
and how that worked out. As I remember, the chin turret was added, wasn't it, as a direct result of that?
Correct. Initially, the Germans were ingenious in developing techniques to attack us. And one of the earliest was to find out our vulnerability from head-on attacks. And as a consequence,
there it is
there
again.
it is.
Yeah, he's coming back. He knows you're here.
Thank you. As a consequence, they determined that they could get out in front of the formation about 3 to 5 miles, get in line abreast, their 109s, their FW-190s, their ME-110s with rockets, and they could fly directly into our formations, fly through the formation, fishtailing and spraying the formation with rockets, cannon shells, and 30 caliber machine guns. And that really tore us apart. They were extremely effective in knocking planes out of the formation, particularly with their head-on attacks. We appealed to Boeing that this was a vulnerability that was not adequately countered, and they came out with the B-17G by mounting a turret under the nose, which was remotely controlled by the bombardier with twin 50s, and that put a stop to the head-on attacks. So that made a big difference. The fighter escort, I would mention to you very briefly, was not as effective as it was supposed to be for the simple reason that all the escorts were flying at twice the speed we were. And as a consequence, in order to remain with us, they had to orbit around the formation and try to fend off the attackers, and therefore burn up excessive fuel, and consequently they'd have to leave us. And then hopefully we could rendezvous with another wave of fighters that would come in and give us some escort protection. But that was not a proven strategy. It was not a practical or workable thing, and that's why when Doolittle said, well, stop trying to escort the bombers and hit the Germans on the ground.
You said wave. What was a typical number of B-17s that went out on a wave, a mission? How many did you have in the air?
When we first arrived in England, we were putting up raids of 300 or 400 aircraft, bombers, B-17s and B-24s. Ultimately, we could actually put up thousands of planes, over 1,000 bombers, in wave after wave, and to cross the English Channel would take over 2.5 hours in the bomber stream.
Yeah, we look up and we see one B-17 drive by. Can you imagine that number? And I can't. It's just absolutely incredible. Okay, more questions. We've got one over here, down low.
Sir, in regards to the turrets underneath and up front, and they're so cramped, how could they possibly even get out of some of those things?
Yeah, belly turret and the chin turret. Chin turret was remotely operated, so there's nobody in that one. But the belly turret, he's asking, hey, how can you get somebody in and get somebody out? That's a very cramped compartment, isn't it?
Yes, the ball turret gunner is probably the most cramped because he's sitting there with his knees up under his chin in an electrically operated, rotated bubble, and in order to extricate him, you have to point the gun straight down and back of him was a panel that opened up into the waist that he could be extricated from or enter the ball turret. But that was one thing that contrasted the B-24 with the B-17, incidentally, was the number of turrets. Initially in the B-17F, the B-17 only had 2 turrets, the top turret behind the cockpit and the ball turret. Ultimately, in the G model, we added the nose turret, which was a remote turret, and the man was not actually in the turret itself. However, in the B-24, they had a nose turret that had a gunner inside, a tail gunner had a turret, and the ball turret, which was retractable. The B-17 was not retractable, as well as the top turret. So the B-24 had 4 turrets, and the B-17 actually only half as many, too.
Okay. All right. Over here.
2 parts. Just a quick question of what was the worst condition of any aircraft you ever brought back home?
Worst condition that you brought home?
Like 2 engines?
I guess the worst condition was that I lost 2 engines. Over the target, both on one side. And that made it pretty difficult because I was flying sideways almost. And as I was landing, or in the landing pattern, the 3rd engine quit. When Rosie Rosenthal came back from Munster as the only survivor of that raid, he likewise had lost 2 engines on one side, and his 3rd engine quit, and he actually made it over the coast, over the White Cliffs of Dover on 1 engine.
Oh.
So that gives you some idea of the integrity of the structural integrity of the B-17. And it was so impressive to me that when I got back, the first thing I did was go buy some Boeing stock.
Ed?
I love it. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Other questions out there right now?
I was also going to ask about your departure procedure. You know, we've all seen that you had so many second interval between takeoffs, but I understand that, especially in the weather, you had a rather unique departure pattern you had to fly.
Taking off in the weather.
Correct. You probably are aware to some extent of the really lousy flying conditions over Europe. Britain in particular, fog, cold, rain, and wind. And as we took off, oftentimes the ceiling would be down on the runway, and we'd literally have to take off on instruments. The pilot would be on instruments from the point of releasing the brakes, and the co-pilot would simply keep the airplane straight on the runway so that he would not have to transition from trying to be visual until he pulled up into the overcast and suddenly convert to, because that is when you get vertigo and you're upside down and you think you're right side up. So, but normally on takeoff we had a specified pattern that we would fly because all over England there were airfields. The British Isles were nothing but an aircraft carrier. There were 39 8th Air Force bases in East Anglia alone. And plus the RAF and the fighter fields, that there was a field every 5 miles. So if you came back all battle damaged and could barely make it across the channel, you landed at the first airport you could see, or first airdrome. And if you missed that, you just pulled up. There was another one right in front of you. But we would take off normally on a mission and be at a prescribed pattern that on instruments we would climb up through the overcast, sometimes to 10,000 feet. But we'd fly so many minutes on one heading, turn, and fly so many minutes on another turn, and maintain a pattern around the aerodrome to avoid other planes taking off from other aerodromes simultaneously. Nevertheless, we still had mid-air collisions in those conditions, and they were not ideal, to be kind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lucky. And yeah, again, I'm the rudder that steers the ship, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop the formal presentation here. A quick shout out, and I don't know if he's in the crowd or not. Dave Ellison owns this F5. Is he out here today? Maybe not. Okay, but anyway, if you see him, thank him. That's his F5 over there. I also want to thank Connie Bolin, wherever she is. This is my last performance here today. I'm going to go see an air show this afternoon. So thank you, Connie, for the honor of allowing me to take this opportunity to. Yeah, there she is. And Lucky's going to be back in the bookstore back there shortly, within 3 minutes, we hope, and get him back there. He'll be signing his books. Again, the title of the book is Damn Lucky. And I just want to end with, this came in the afterword, and I think it's poignant. It says, never forget that we are all first and foremost Americans. We should all look for common goals and seek compromise rather than conquering the other side, which serves only to divide us. As private citizens, we can do something to alter our perspective. United, we've done amazing things. We defeated fascism, put a man on the moon, created a cultural and economic empire that is the envy of the world. America will never be perfect. It will always have problems, but the only solution is to stay together and find common ground. Stay united. We proved that in World War II. No, Lucky, you proved that in World War II, and we can prove it again. So, Lucky, it has been an honor. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
Well done.
Thank you, Sam.
Well done.
Thank you.